Okay, so we have video of Deacon, we have a list of questions. Anything top of mind that you want to talk about right away before we even look at the video? Or,
No, I did have one more question, but,
mm-hmm,
but it can wait, or, you know, it's after watching the meeting video that you did yesterday with Rarely Wrong,
mm-hmm.
how Deacon is a very mild version of her because he's just kind of tense like she is. And so that video helped a lot. And we were working on that today. So I had a question about that. But
Oh,
um,
good. Yeah, because in our group, it's going to come out on YouTube publicly, but not for a few weeks. But I showed it to our group because I had you a little bit in mind because when we're talking about getting from the posture of extension to the posture of long and low,
mhm,
it's a global change of use throughout the whole body. And it's essentially what it means is the horse is going from stabilizing the movement on the front end to learning to stabilize the movement through the back and hindquarters. So that origin of stability and motion is shifting from the front half to the back half.
mhm,
And also when we're working, like we had discussed, I think with Deacon, it's a little bit the only reason he's not consistently in long and low, even though straightness is an issue, I think it's because he lacks engagement and stability on the hindquarters.
okay.
And I think that's why when you ride him, you might not be getting any steps where he's shifting into long and low, but that doesn't mean there's no value because with your weight on and with what you described you're doing under saddle, you're probably slowly building up the strength and stability of the hindquarters, and then you see him choose more long and low on the lunge line after a ride rather
Okay.
than during the ride. And
Okay.
that kind of makes sense because they won't let go of the neck until the back and hindquarter feels like it can take over that role of
Okay.
stabilizing motion. And so you'll get a lot of coming and going in that process.
Mhm. Okay.
So let's share the screen. Let's start with your video and hopefully when I go to the full screen, I can still get to your questions. Let me just check what the questions were really for. Oh, so the first couple of questions you're talking about on the right rein, it feels fluid and normal and balanced, and it feels like I can maintain a decent position. On the left rein, it feels like he's initiating the turn by stepping in with his left hind and then getting stuck when I ask him to step over with his inside front. And then you've been using your outside thigh and leg. Works great on the right rein. And you're wondering if you need to time it differently on the left rein. I don't think it's a matter of timing. I think that's where he's tight. I think that's why you're having trouble going to the left, is he has a lot of chronic tightness around the left shoulder.
Okay.
So let's look at that. And thanks for doing the edit. You don't always have to. It's no big deal.
Well, I can only put the camera at the far end. And so by
Yeah,
the time we get all the way down there, which is actually where he struggles the most, is down at that end.
because
Um,
he gets distracted.
yeah, the
Mhm.
pasture, if you're looking at this video, the pasture is off to the left and there are woods across the street. And he just has this magnet that takes him out.
So right there, even though it's only a few strides, let me just back it up there. So you're coming down, kind of, you're using the whole arena as a figure eight, right? He's sort of trying to lengthen the neck. But where I see the very first change is as you're coming down the straight line into the turn. As he comes through the turn, just there in the turn, he lengthens the neck more. It slows down a hair. You see that?
Mhm.
So let me see if I can. So basically, he did that coming through an arc about like that. I'm not great with these tools,
Okay.
right? But as
Uh-huh.
he came through this part of the turn, that's what I would sort of watch for. If you're playing with a figure eight, straight lines, spiral in, spiral out. What I mean is where he accidentally starts to change, like lengthen the neck further, slow the speed a little bit, and move closer towards long and low. He's showing you by doing that spontaneously the degree of turn that he finds helpful.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, and we'll look at the video further, but I just want to pause there because if I am like, let's say I just did that exact same ride and he's kind of shortening the neck, not really lengthening the neck. It's a little rocky under the saddle, not very smooth. Um, as soon as I have to go through the corner of the arena, and let's say it's this degree of arc right here through the turn, I'm just trying to kind of make it bigger so you can see it. This degree of arc through the
Hmm.
turn. What I'm going to do is try to continue. Whoops, I'm going to try to continue that arc. And
Okay.
that's what determines, and like I said, be a little, my drawing is not great. My drawing
I
skills are
understand.
terrible. But you get the idea
Okay.
that as you come through the corner, if it's a 30-degree arc, I'm going to continue on that arc and see if I stay on the arc, is it easier for him to lengthen his neck, maybe slow his speed, maybe increase his speed, but make some adjustment and more consistently keep the neck long, or maybe go deeper. And these are kind of the happy accidents that I'm looking for, whether I'm tracking a figure eight or I'm going straight line corner or I'm playing with spiraling in, spiraling out.
Okay.
And hang on, let me erase that because it'll
And so
stay.
if actually I noticed that today when I rode him and I tried to do that, not as specifically as you just described, but I thought, hey, I noticed something. I think I let him go straight at that point because he kind of wanted to go straight. But if I had kept on the arc, so if I try the arc and it doesn't make a difference, should I still
It
um
already made a difference. And this is the creative part of it, or the dynamic conversation part of it. So
mhm.
let's just go back to a little closer to the beginning. So here, he's sort of level with the neck, but it's like the last vestiges of that. It's not a high-headed version of extension, but he really isn't in basic balance. Otherwise, you would have great steering and no issues, right? So he's kind of in the last little bit of still making that transition, needing some muscle tightness in the neck to stabilize his movement because he's not 100% able to trust his own hindquarters. We could put it that way.
Okay.
So as you're coming down the straight line, you see the neck shortening, lengthening, the head up a little, down a little, but it's kind of stationary there.
Hmm.
Then, just as he comes through this arc, and I used to follow my own tracks to find the circle, you see there's a distinctly different use of the neck and head. Did you see
Yeah.
that as you came through the turn?
Hmm.
So even if he can't hold it, it already showed you that that degree of turn facilitated a change
Okay.
because you're working on the straight neck and levelness under the saddle the whole time. So the only difference, and you're letting him pick his speed. So all of those elements being the same, the only thing that really changed was you came off a straight line to make a turn.
Okay.
But as you made the turn, you had a distinct change in the right direction towards long and low. So
Okay.
that would tell me I'm going to repeat that corner into a circle.
Hmm.
And even if he's a little bit, I go, he's not going to be worse than what he already was on the straight line, and he might be better. Even if
Okay.
he struggles a little bit, I'm going to see if we could play with that circle for 10 or 15 minutes on the same direction and sort of see how he comes and goes. And
Okay.
and if the percentage of time I'm seeing him attempting to lengthen his neck much more frequently than he's trying to shorten the neck, that tells me that size circle is helping him find the engagement and stabilize his hindquarters, even if it's not an immediate, obvious transition.
Okay. So what if it's really hard for me to keep him on that size circle?
Yeah, and this is tracking left, which is the direction you had questions about. So to the right, it feels smoother and easier. And to the left, what you're doing is, let's see, well, you're keeping his neck straight, which is good. What your question was about was in order to keep the neck straight and keep the back level, you're having to feel like 99% of your body weight is on your left seat bone. You're using a lot of resistance on the right rein, and you have to slow him down to almost one step at a time. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes.
Okay, that's exactly the support he needs to change his pattern of tracking left.
Okay. So
So
don't let the fact that I'm using a lot of force to keep him there, that's not a problem.
it's only a problem because he's crooked and on the forehand. But that support, because if you had less resistance, say on the right rein, as soon as he bends his neck left, it's going to roll the back more. That doesn't serve him or you,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So the resistance with your body weight on the left side of the seat and that resistance on the right rein and having to slow him down, what he's telling you is that direction. Maybe you, like you said, you felt the left hind leg step under, right?
Hmm.
So you feel the engaged step. It can either be not stable from his perspective, or I think what he's struggling with more is the left front leg abducting, reaching in the direction of the circle can be a real sticking point for horses. So when they've been on the forehand and a little crooked, if
Hmm.
he's been with too much weight on both front legs, it's going to tighten the neck and all the muscles of the thoracic sling around the shoulder.
Hmm.
If he's been on the forehand and slightly favoring the left front, that's going to be the tightest front leg.
That makes sense because that's his low hoof as well.
Oh yeah, then
That
that's
means,
been the overloaded leg. And
okay.
And so typically what you might notice and what you're struggling with, the reason it takes so much weight on the left seat bone and so much force on the right rein is because his habit of turning left is most likely placing the left hind underneath where it should be, but then taking the left front towards the midline. And that's why they bend the neck, roll the back, fall on the inside shoulder.
As opposed to taking the front left out, like in,
Right,
it would be
right.
in.
So
If he puts it towards the midline, so that means he's crossing over with his right rather than stepping
yeah, his
out.
front legs can be backwards.
Oh, that makes sense.
They're
Okay.
going the wrong way. Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's why you have so much force on the right rein is because if that left front leg on a left turn wants to go towards the midline, which is what it does when it has too much weight, it goes the wrong
Yeah.
way, right? Because they're stabilizing on it, they're leaning on it.
Okay.
And so that's muscularly tight and also a habit.
Hmm.
So the way to change that habit is like if you had a loose rein and you just sort of use the left rein to make a turn, He
Hmm.
would likely overbend his neck to the left,
Hmm.
lean towards the left shoulder. It's interesting. Oh, and he's also going to push up on your left seat bone.
Hmm.
All of that is describing his body weight tilting too far left on a left turn,
Hmm.
right? And so the way we counterbalance that, which is the correction, number one, you're keeping a boatload of, well, you're always keeping enough weight on one half of your body, left to right, as much as needed to keep yourself level.
Hmm.
And in this case, if it's extreme, you might feel like 90 to 100% of your body weight is on your left seat bone because there's no horse on the right,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so our guide is, am I level over gravity? Not am I level in the saddle, not am I level on the horse. Am
Hmm.
I level? If you look down at your thigh bones, if your thigh bones are symmetrical, your seat bones are level. But when you ride a crooked horse, it really hurts our brain a lot because we're used to balancing through the feel of weight distribution. And you
Hmm.
you can't balance like that on a crooked horse. You have to have a different point of reference. So if you look down at your own thigh bones, if he's really going to put you to the right, your left thigh bone is going to come up or be more forward. The
Hmm.
left leg would get shorter. So you basically have to move your center or put your weight or put your weight to the left until your left and right thigh bones look symmetrical from your point of view in the saddle. That tells you your skeleton is balanced, right? But it hurts our head because to do that on a crooked horse, we have greater than 50% of our body weight on one side.
Yeah.
The way you feel he's correcting his rotation issue is because it goes from, say, 100% of your body weight on your left seat bone to 90 to 80 to 70 to 50 to equal.
Hmm. Okay.
As he corrects his spinal function, you don't need the extra body weight on the left. You're always just maintaining your own skeletal levelness,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh, go ahead.
on a straight horse, like we're taught to ride a theoretical balanced horse, but none of our horses are balanced,
Hmm.
right? So we have to kind of look at, are my seat bones level to each other? Are my thigh bones symmetrical with each other? And then you know when you need more weight on the right or when you need more weight on the left, and when you don't need weight more to the right or left. That tells you he corrected the rotation.
Okay.
So if he's really rotated and for you to be level, you have to put 90% of your body weight on your left seat bone during a left turn. That's exactly what makes his dysfunction uncomfortable.
Okay.
And so your body weight sitting against that, we can't fix the rotation directly. We can make the rotational issue so uncomfortable that he has to rearrange his body,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Well, I actually felt an improvement today. Um, and I think I was more focused on, I think yesterday I was more focused on my using my muscles to take him where he needed to go,
Oh,
like
yeah.
direct him. And today I was more focused on my weight and my position. And so I think it was helpful to do that.
It's a
Um,
far more efficient way for us to ride. We don't fatigue as easily. And it also allows the horse to make muscular tonal changes because when we're overusing our muscles, it does two things. It shuts off our ability to receive information through the horse because we create an internal loop of information the more we tighten our muscles. And two, it gives the horse literally something to lean against. So
okay.
they don't change as easily if we're creating a muscular force that they can just sort of brace against.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I probably was feeling that during this ride. And today I didn't feel that as much. But I have a couple of questions about what you said.
Okay.
So, okay, if my weight is more in my left seat bone, I rode with stirrups today, but in this video I was without stirrups. Um, is my arm, is my whole body going to like, is my left leg going to sink, my heel going to sink further down? Or are my feet going to be level with the ground and I'll just have more weight?
So
Like, am
let's
I
look,
actually going to,
it's just weight. So the ideal, and this is a totally different way to think of balancing our bodies as a rider, and
Mhm.
we haven't gone into it with you because you're basically the challenges you're having, like it's always dynamic between the horse and rider. But what I look at is the horse struggling more, is the rider struggling to the point that the horse can't change. Your balance is good enough that your horse could make some changes, but we can tweak that a little bit because, again, if I take my line tool, let me just do a line. If I go here from the sky to the ground through the middle of your body. Oops, that's
yeah, my
not.
inside leg is too far forward.
So let me see if I can move this a little bit. Oops. Oh, these drawing tools. Sorry. So
Oh,
I
that's okay.
just want a straight line and I think I tweaked it, but I just want to move that sort of through your torso and you're a little bit far away. But if I go through, like, do you see how you're behind the vertical?
Mhm.
Let me delete that and see if I can do something a little easier. Um, so if we draw a line kind of straight down through your body, and we'll just put you back in motion so you can see. Do you see how the bottoms of your feet are in front of your center of gravity?
Yes,
Your head is a little bit behind your seat, and your feet are a little bit in front of your seat.
yes,
That's putting you behind the vertical, where you're not going to be very effective with your inner thigh or the use of your pelvis.
yeah,
So that would be something you could play with as you're working with him under saddle, because being a little bit behind the vertical puts you more at the mercy of any rotation issue. It's harder to feel. And like there, you're a little bit more up over your legs. I didn't even see your head. And see, there you're up over your legs again. So I'm not sure what was going on with what we just looked at, because most of the time I look at you riding, you're vertical, but like there, you're leaning back again. And so I'm not sure what you're doing, but when you start to play with maybe helping him, I think you might be leaning back a little bit, putting a concentrated weight in your seat and getting your legs in front of you. So it's just something to be
yeah.
mindful of. Um,
When I saw this video, I worked on that today actually because I thought that's not right. So
yeah.
hopefully I
And
did it better.
the way I know I'm vertical is when I have slightly more weight in my thighs compared to my seat. When we get
Okay.
a little bit behind the vertical, suddenly our seat feels heavier than our thigh bones.
Yeah, I
So,
think this is kind of me trying to be defensive because I'm anticipating him getting stiff and hard. And so I think I'm just going into a defensive mode rather
okay.
than, which is not helpful, I know, but
No, and it could be because, like at that end of the arena, you said he's a little bit more reactive. So that's normal. Um, so here again, as you come down the straight line into this same turn to the left, you do a really good job keeping your seat level. Oh, whoops, he's out of the picture. So we didn't get to see too much that time. Um,
yeah, towards the end of the video, we do more tighter turns
okay.
to the
So
left.
right here, let me back it up just a smidge. Because right here, as you come out of a left turn, it looks like you're using the whole arena, but you come out, you head across the diagonal,
Mhm.
right? So as he comes out, that head tossing you can almost see the left front leg doesn't stride kind of as freely as the right front leg. So I
Oh,
suspect on left turns that that heavy right rein and your weight to the left is because he just can't abduct or reach away from the midline easily with his left front leg.
okay. So do ground stretches where I manipulate that leg help, or does that just,
Oh, no. In fact, you can do more damage than good because,
okay,
yeah, no, when it's tight, it's a little by little thing. And
okay.
so, again, there, now that you're tracking right, he's definitely more long and low,
Mhm.
right? So, on the right turns, keeping your seat level, keeping the neck straight, and maybe staying on a degree of turn where he first lengthens his neck. Like if you play with squares, spiral in, spiral out, figure eights, corners in the arena, whenever he more obviously lengthens that neck,
Mhm.
notice if I'm on a turn, what degree of turn, and then just immediately turn it into a circle.
Okay.
Even if it's heavy and hard and awkward, try to stay on that circle for about 15 minutes, straight, level, that size circle, and
Okay.
see if step after step after step, his what the circle does is it encourages more engagement of the hind legs
Mhm.
and it causes all four legs to adduct and abduct. So you
Okay.
get to work those oblique muscle groups where he might be pretty tight,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
So, like there, as he starts to lengthen on the turn, even though he's shaking his head and he's a little fussy, right? That can be that transitional period from as soon as they get a little bit stable on the hindquarters, the front end is releasing chronic tension at the very same rate. And what happens then is he's not quite stable on the hindquarters, but he's stable enough to start to become unstable on the front end too.
Oh, so that's what the head shaking indicates.
It can. Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause
It
he
can
would think,
also manifest in sort of short, long, head up, head down. I think in his case, he starts shaking his head because it would feel good to let go of that muscle tightness up front, but he
mhm.
doesn't really yet feel stable, fully stable behind. So
Okay.
in that transitional period, all horses get unstable in front and behind as they're transitioning. And so that's when working on a circle, step after step after step with the placement of the hind legs, it's sometimes easier for the horses to make that transition.
Okay. Okay,
Does
because he was tossing his head up and down a lot today. Now, see on this,
That's
does it look like
lovely.
he's stepping in with with
Hmm.
his outside hind though? That's not correct, is it?
So theoretically, the reason we want a straight midline and a level back under the saddle instead of bending on a circle
Mhm.
is because that's going to, I theoretically, ideally, going to cause the inside hind to step towards the midline, outside hind to step away from the midline. That
Mhm.
swings the hindquarter out for the turn, and the front end swings to the inside with the opposite front leg movement. So
Mhm.
the outside front goes to the midline, the inside front goes away from the midline. But when horses are in extension, when they've been disengaged, the back is dropped, they're tight and short through the neck and the top line, the
Mhm.
legs typically do the opposite or they disengage backwards, right? So disengagement can be a crossing of the midline, a lateral disengagement, but disengagement can also be the hind legs are farther behind the torso than they ever come towards the center of the torso.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't worry where he's placing the legs
Okay.
because the spinal functions and the coordination of the spine are what dictate the exact kinematics of the legs,
Mhm.
right? So The kinematics just means the geometric flight path of every leg. And if he's been putting the legs backwards, which is very typical when horses have excessive lateral bending, or when they are going around with their back dropped, or even if they've been in long and low for too long, they can start putting the leg kinematics the wrong way.
Mhm.
So it's very difficult to use our influence to change the leg kinematics, and that usually takes our focus to the wrong place.
Okay.
So if you work on a straight midline and a level back and the path of travel, right? Maybe give a little leg if he needs it, or slow him down a little if he needs it. The circle is doing the work on the challenge to the hindquarter engagement. Your body weight side to side is doing the work of resisting rotation issues, guiding towards correct rotation. And your reins are doing the work of saying, don't bend, stay in alignment, right?
Okay.
Then if you need a little leg aid, you say, could you push more? And if he's too fast and you use the turn, your back, or a little bit of rein resistance on two reins, you're saying, could you stabilize more? That's what's related to the braking function.
Oh, wait, would you say that part again?
Braking and pushing,
Well, yeah, you said that's the part that stabilizes him.
the
But
braking.
okay.
Yeah. And so and it's confusing terms, but basically the way horses lift the back. And I think you went through some information with Jean-Luc where he actually shows how the back muscles attach to the facets of the spine in
Mhm.
opposing directions,
Mhm.
right? So those opposing directions of the back muscles and the different hindquarter muscles and the placement during one full phase of a stride, there's a braking portion, a braking phase of every stride, and a pushing phase of every stride.
Mhm.
There's a braking use of the back and hindquarter muscles and a pushing use of the hindquarter back or the back and hindquarter muscles. So I just call it the braking mechanism. So if you can see the cursor, basically the brakes are running from the saddle to the tail and include the hind limbs.
Mhm.
Same with the accelerator. So the brakes and the accelerator live back here,
Okay.
right? So if I look at these strides right in this moment, because the thrust of movement is generated by the hind legs in the pushing phase, but
Mhm.
it's also resisted. Body weight and instability are resisted during the braking phase,
Mhm.
right? So just like when we walk, we're swinging one leg forward while the other leg is stabilizing our body. Then
Yeah.
our foot hits the ground and we're in the braking phase while the other leg is in the pushing phase. So
Mhm.
we're sort of alternating, creating motion, stabilizing motion. Same thing with the horse. What's interesting is traditionally we're sort of taught to drive the horse energetically forward into the bit, or that the belly lifts the back, or more speed equals more lift. None of that is true,
Mhm.
right? The brilliance of Jean-Luc was sort of going, it's during the braking phase of every single stride that the pelvis rotates forward into what we call a more engaged position. And it's when the hind hoof comes to the center of the body and lands is the beginning of the braking phase of the stride,
Mhm.
right? So then the leg hits peak vertical and begins pushing. And the thrust is disengaging, right? It's the pelvis rotating backwards and the foot pushing off the ground. And so if we want more engagement, we want more braking, not more pushing.
Mhm.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
If we need more stability and or engagement, which is what we've talked about with Deacon, then the circles are going to encourage both of those things. Circles, turns are a way to increase the braking capacity of the body without having to use rein resistance. That's what I love about circles and turns.
Hmm.
So our braking aid is just like the brakes in our car. When we tighten our back muscles, core muscles, that's the first tap on the brakes. We're resisting the push of the hindquarter. If that doesn't work, we can turn our rein contact into a rein aid by increasing resistance through both reins to the bit
Hmm.
as part of the braking aid, right? If neither of those work, we also have to use kind of the runaway ramp. We can use a turn, right? Because just turning energy has a slowing effect. It also, working on a circle, encourages slightly more adduction of the inside hind leg, which is also encouraging a deeper placement of the inside hind leg. And that's how it helps increase engagement. But all of that has to be figured out by the horse. We can't make them do it. It's way too complicated.
Hmm.
So the degree of a turn that you hold as a circle is wherever Deacon goes to lengthen his neck more, you had an accidental step of good engagement with good braking. And that's why he's still in motion. So you're balancing the braking with the pushing. If you have too much braking, you're not going anywhere, right? But when he slowed down and let go of his neck in the first part of the video that we played a couple times,
Hmm.
that tells you that degree of turn helped him place his legs in the right place, activate the brakes, and so he could lengthen his neck.
Gotcha. Okay, that
Does
makes
that make
sense.
sense?
Yeah, perfect
Okay.
sense.
And that's why if you stay on it, not every step is going to be good, and he might not even be consistent in that same length.
Hmm.
But he showed you with that happy accident, this is the size circle where I accidentally found my hindquarters and actually used them. So you
Okay, yeah,
go,
we had quite a few of those moments. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I just didn't know to do that.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So here on this turn, this is quite good. The neck is straight, you're level. He's reaching with the left front, but
mhm.
that probably didn't feel good to you because it's not easy for him.
Yeah, it feels very labored.
Yes. And
Okay.
that is because you're asking him to change everything. You're
Okay.
saying, don't bend your neck, don't roll your back, right? And do turn left on this size circle and don't lose forward. So within all the don'ts, he has to explore and experiment, right? And it's not easy for him. So it's going to feel labored at first, which is whenever we change coordination, it's hard. And there's always windows of instability in the process, even of ideal change. We're destabilizing the old habit, but we still need repetition to stabilize a new habit,
Yeah.
right?
So
So you get a lot of chaos. Every time you effectively change the coordination, it can almost feel like you're doing something wrong, or the horse will say, oh, that's too hard. I can't do it. Don't want to do it because it's hard.
yeah. And so one of my questions was, should I limit this like so he's not sore or gets, I don't want to overdo it, do I? Or
The
not?
way like the more you play with that left turn, just the way you did it. I want to go back and look at that again because that left turn is exactly what you were describing. It feels like a slow, forward moving turn on the haunches.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the guidance he needs to change the back, the braking mechanism, the pushing mechanism, the movement of all four legs. Otherwise, he knows what he knows and he's not going to change.
Hmm.
That's his habit.
Hmm.
Oh, I might have to go back a little farther.
He seems to have this internal clock where he knows that if we've been riding for half an hour, that's been our normal ride time.
Hmm.
All right, it's about time to stop. And so,
So I go, horses have a wicked good sense of time. I go, they stopped like on the nose, according to my watch, because I work by the hour. I go, good, bad, or otherwise, this is the time I have, so this is how long we're going to work.
Yeah.
And but the way I recognize fatigue, and this is why the learning frame of mind is so important, and it becomes my beacon, because the learning frame of mind is how we're going to read thresholds,
Hmm.
right? So if he's calm and his ears are showing that he's very focused, he's all business, he can physically struggle a lot, but you haven't hit a threshold that's too much for him.
Okay.
When they start to become defensive, if they completely lose forward and don't go forward from a normal leg aid, if they start to get anxious and suddenly can't slow down, when their sort of distraction factor is increasing, when the energy is increasing, or when they're kind of trying to blow through our direction and guidance, all of those are signs of defensiveness. And if they're coming midway or later in the ride,
Hmm.
that to me are the signs of fatigue.
Okay, that's really good information.
And if I'm asking the horse to do something that is hitting a physical threshold regarding comfort or capacity, I'm going to get resistance, right? So as soon as I get a certain amount of resistance where we can no longer struggle our way through it it might be heavy, it might be awkward, it might be slow, but you can sort of tell when he's trying and when
Mhm.
he goes, okay, I've had enough. I'm not even
Yeah,
going to try.
I can tell. So take him to that point every ride, or do I?
Not necessarily. Like if I have an hour, I
Mhm.
might struggle with that horse, or like that video of Rarely Wrong. I
Mhm.
got one attempt at what I was looking for in the very last minute of the time I had that day, which was about 35 to 40 minutes,
Mhm.
right? And I got one try, one little sniff of the right direction for going through all that chaos first. But
Oh,
all that chaos was her process. And so, like with Deacon, when you're working on the left, if he's slow but self-propelled, you can still keep going. If he's a little fast, but you're not having to hold him back, you can keep going. If he's heavy, but you have moments of lightness, heaviness, lightness, heaviness, you keep going. If he's calm and his ears are sort of on you or half out, like he's really focused internally, he's all into it. Keep going.
okay.
And all of that, like either losing the learning frame of mind or an almost unsafe reaction to what we're trying to get them to do. Those are the two ways that the horse goes, you've reached maximum capacity, right? But every ride, if I'm training a horse, I'm looking for that place where they can remain calm, remain focused, but I'm going to feel a boatload of physical struggle. That's the place I'm going to make progress.
Okay.
Right. And
Um,
if I'm on the right track, like let's say you feel you have to keep 100% of your body weight on your left seat bone, and let's say you have 10 pounds of pressure on your right rein, and that's where you start and you struggle. What I would expect if he's making the kind of changes that I'm looking for in balance is after 5 minutes on the circle, maybe I feel like I only need 90% or 85% of my body weight on my left seat bone. Maybe that right rein went from 10 pounds to 9 pounds. Maybe
mhm.
it went 10 0 or 10 1, 1 pound, 10 pounds, right? Or 2 pounds, 10 pounds. So the feel of force against my body is becoming less. Maybe not gone, but it's lessening. And that's what's telling you he's rearranging his mechanics towards balance is because we feel less force. We
Right.
don't have we don't have to shift so much body weight or use so much pressure on the rein.
Okay.
right? If he's not getting it, that's where I said give something about 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And if your weight shift is still exactly the same, he hasn't shown any attempt at a postural change. And in fact, it got worse. And that right rein got heavier and heavier and heavier rather than lighter, then okay, we got to change strategies. This isn't working. But when I look at you doing a left turn, I think it's very difficult for both of you because of the very pattern you're trying to change,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So as you come through this turn, when he slows down, and I love the camera sees the front legs. So you see the hind legs, there's the reach with the left front, right?
Mhm.
He swishes his tail, he complains a little bit, he goes, I need to stop, and you stop, you pet him. That was beautifully done.
Okay. And so if he's complaining on that size circle the whole 15 minutes,
You can
then
take breaks. You can take
okay.
breaks. Like you can, I would, if I'm trying to change a coordination, knowing the body is going to have a hard time, I prefer personally to take a rest at halt rather than go off and let his balance fall apart and let the old pattern just take back over.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
Because I go, I might get 2 steps and rest, and 2 steps and rest, and maybe one lap and rest because it's difficult. But as soon as I drop the reins, go to the right, or let him put that front leg back the wrong way, I'm undermining the change I want to achieve.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Hmm.
Okay. And so stay on in the same direction, even though I let him rest for 15 minutes. And then do the other rein even, well, he rolls too much to the right when he's bending right. That's his easier
Hmm.
direction. I have to counteract that as well, but it's just so much easier. So
Yes.
it's beneficial to work on that rein as well. Maybe just
Hmm.
not as long
Yeah,
or
like I find like he's what we call a left-handed horse, right?
yeah.
I'm a right-handed person. If I want to brush my teeth with either hand, I'm going to have to spend more time being slow and careful and practice with my left hand just to
Mhm.
bring it up to what I've learned to do with my right hand. And that's basically your left-right balance, whether we're talking brushing teeth or the horse turning or one lead versus the other. We're
Mhm.
all a little bit one-sided. And so going to the left for him as you're trying to change that, sort of the equivalent of going, okay, it's easier for me if I use my right hand, but that's going to keep perpetuating the imbalance. So I need to practice more often, but I also need to go slower when I use my left hand.
Okay, so if I ride him an hour, should I do 3 sets of 15 minutes going on the difficult direction and then just 15 minutes going the easy way?
I
Should I
hate to
put it
say
like
this
that?
to you, but it's not that predictable. It's one of those things where if he's if he fatigues to the left, then
Mhm.
you could give him a break by working on the right direction. Like right there, that is just lovely, right? It's just lovely. It's a forward moving turn on the haunches, and the hind legs were not going the right direction for the turn, but they're still adducting and abducting because you're kind of on a bit of a diagonal line at that moment. And you've got the front legs adducting and abducting as well. That's part of recovering the muscle use and the agility through his leg kinematics. You can only get that if the spine is straight, if the rotation is level, and if he's starting to use the hindquarters correctly with more engagement. And you see, as soon as you engage him on the turn, you can see it's very stiff. His hind legs
Mhm.
don't want to come forward easily,
Mhm.
right? So I think the last issues you're having with the barrel rolling, yes, it's related to rotation, but I think it's also related to the fact that he doesn't stabilize his movement from the hindquarters. He still wants to be on the forehand,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So that turn, yeah, like there, when you get more width between the legs, that
Hmm.
is kind of the point of working straight on a circle. Straight and level on a circle is to work that oblique muscle group. And it's going to engage and stabilize the hindquarters, but it's also going to free up the reach, the lateral reach of the front legs. And it doesn't mean every single step is going to be correct. He's going to put the legs the wrong way. That's why
Hmm.
we don't try to control it, right? We're working with the back, the steering, our body weight, the reins, so he can explore. Where do I put my legs? How
Hmm.
do I do this? If my back is straight, if my spine is straight, if my back is level, if and I have to be on this turn, that's the criteria we set. He has to figure out how to get comfortable within that criteria. If
Okay.
if he starts to struggle or resist you going to the left, even after, say, 5 or 10 minutes, but he did a pretty good job for those 5 or 10 minutes, I
Mhm.
might give him a rest at halt, or I might say, okay, let's do a little to the right. If he's going to the right and it feels wonderful, I might give him 5 or 10 minutes there and go, okay, let's see if that helped us work on the left and go back to the left.
Okay.
So I might feel him in any given ride. And the more resistance I get from him, the more I know it's getting harder for him. So I could give him a rest or a change of direction.
Okay.
If he's struggling, but he's still kind of happily walking forward, not giving you too much resistance, your reine's getting lighter, your body weight is, you're not working so hard in the saddle, then I go, keep going because he's just starting to get the hang of it.
Okay.
So with some horses at different stages of development, I might do one whole ride just to the left because I feel it gets better and better and better the longer I stay left,
Okay.
right? As soon as it starts to go downhill or go back the other way, I either have fatigue, they need a short break, I could be done, or I could say, okay, let's try the other direction.
Okay. So just because he fatigues going to one direction doesn't mean that he'll be fatigued going the other direction. So you just need to
Yeah,
really play with it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and if he's fatigued in general, both directions will suck, and you'll just go, "Okay, we're done."
Yeah.
And I don't really care if I end on a bad note because I'm always trying to get the most amount of change that's physically possible and mentally, emotionally possible without crossing thresholds. I'm trying to get maximum change per ride that I can get. And
Okay.
so I'm always living in the world of struggle. And sometimes I go, they fatigue faster than I expected. So when it goes from when you first get on, you should be working the hardest with the heaviest feels and support. If
Hmm.
your support and your training decisions are accurate, the feel of your aids gets lighter, maybe less frequent. The horse holds the balance a few more strides at a time or makes bigger changes. And then somewhere in that ride, it starts to get worse again,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
That to me is the sign of fatigue. I expect the worst balance when I first get on. I expect it to get better the longer I'm on. And if it starts to go from going better, 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 better to worse, 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 that's fatigue.
And so mentally that it doesn't sour a horse to always end fatigued like that. You know, they always say end on a positive note
I
and
know.
don't be greedy and all that stuff.
Yeah. And that to me is like when you start working dynamically, and some of the questions you ask, it's a little bit of a shift of understanding the difference in training concepts. If
Yeah.
I'm using condition response or if I'm training for obedience, I could easily overdo it. But when you start to feel that right rein lighten, that feels as good to your horse as it feels to you. That
Oh, okay.
is its own reward.
Okay.
When you're not struggling to keep 90% of your body weight to the left side because he's adjusted his back, that feels as good to your horse as it feels to you.
Okay.
So balance is a constantly self-rewarding process because you're easing overwork of tight muscles or overworked muscles. You're
Hmm.
the only reason they can fatigue sooner and they don't mind it is they're just working new muscles or muscles that have weakened. But
Hmm.
the coordination is always bringing more efficiency and ease into the movement. So every time we go, that feels great, our horse is thinking the same thing.
Okay.
Like that's the power of working dynamically with balance is it feels good. And so even if I end on a bad note because the horse's muscles just got tired, they don't hold it against me because they go, everything we did really felt pretty good. I felt better and better and better through our time together. And then I kind of pooped out. And you recognize that. If we don't recognize it and we try to push them through it, thinking, oh, no pain, no gain, then they might go, and I found it's just going to get worse. Like I go, you're not going to end on a good note at a certain point. So I don't worry about it. And if I punish the horse or I start to shift from dynamic balance back into the thought of obedience, then ending on a bad note or pushing them to that point, they're not going to enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah. And it didn't feel good to us either. So sometimes when I start to feel frustrated or confused or I'm not sure, I go, maybe I need to pause for a second and kind of tune into what my horse is telling me or how my horse is feeling. And
Hmm.
if it doesn't feel good to me, like if he struggles, I struggle, but struggle doesn't necessarily feel awful. It's just
Hmm.
hard,
Okay.
right? And the more we struggle, 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 and suddenly get a good feeling, that tells me the specific exercise I'm working on is going to work. It's
Hmm.
just a matter of time. Right.
Okay.
And so nobody learns how to swim in a specific amount of time.
Hmm.
We all learn to swim at a different rate with different situations. We have different bodies, but we can all learn how to swim. But when we're talking coordination, that's the unpredictability of it where I go, I don't know if I'm going to do 15 minutes each way. I don't know if I'm even going to stay on this size circle. I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do, which is why I never have a lesson plan because it depends on how the horse is responding to what I'm doing with my body, with my aids, with the degree of turn or a straight line. How is he responding to that?
So they don't get bored for going on a circle, the same circle, or just, like it's like I'm really tired of the same circle. They don't feel that way.
If you were doing it mindlessly, we would all be bored.
Hmm.
But how hard are you working to get a left circle? It's taking all of your focus. It's not boring, it's intense,
Right. Okay.
right? That's what he's going through as well. And that's sort of the people watching you think you're doing the most boring work in the world. But when
Mhm.
you're changing this conversation, talking to him about his internal coordination, using your internal coordination,
Mhm.
that's not boring. It's like having a cup of coffee with a good friend. You're not really doing anything, but you're having this fascinating conversation that's, making you feel better and making him feel better. So whether I do a pattern or I don't do a pattern or I stay on one small circle for a whole hour, it's never boring for my horse. And I know that because the ears are like half out or, moving around. They're not distracted. They're not cranky. They're calm. They're not anxious. And they're
Mhm.
sort of got that mental focus of being all business.
Okay, so when he is more distracted, that's a sign of fatigue if we've been.
That can be a sign of fatigue because distraction is a form of defensiveness.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, okay, can I ask you, let's see, let me look at my questions. Um,
I know, I think we covered most of your
I think,
questions.
yeah, okay, now I have a question about the whole mental side of this. Like
Mm.
rarely wrong. He's tense. I'm trying to teach him to focus on me. And food has been the best thing. I do a type of like clicker training where when
Hmm.
he looks at me, I'll give him a reward when he's calm and not, trying to bite me.
Yes, yes.
Um, and under saddle, I've learned that when um, he's been almost impossible to stop. So he'll just forget I'm on board, and he'll just keep walking and just won't stop. And so I've gotten to the habit of when he does stop and turns around and looks at me, I'll give him a treat. And when he does something difficult and he's paying attention to me and he's not distracted, I'll give him a treat. And
Mhm.
so I don't want to create a monster where, not a monster, but I don't want him to just all of a sudden start stopping and looking for a treat.
Yeah.
But I see how beneficial that is. And like on the lunge line today, this has been happening more often, he'll stop and looking straight ahead, like he just halts for whatever reason. And then after a few seconds, he'll just turn in and look at me. And that's what I want. I want him to pay attention to me. Um, so I don't really know how much of that I need to reward and encourage, or do I just acknowledge that, hey, I see you, and then make him move on?
So think of it this way, that feeling unsafe feels terrible.
Hmm.
Feeling safe feels good.
Hmm.
Positive reinforcement would be treats, affection, but also doing nothing. Just pausing, doing nothing is a positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is just doing something. And when we give a leg aid or a rain aid or even shift our weight, what we're using is negative reinforcement. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means we say no when we do something, we say yes when we do nothing. And the treats, they can turn that against us. I had one client whose horse refused to move forward until you put another carrot slice in, like a quarter,
Oh
right?
no.
So it can really end up working against you if that's the only positive reinforcement you use,
Mhm.
right? So feeling safe, like the reason I'm so confident about like the learning frame of mind is because all bodies want to feel safe.
Mhm.
So what we're doing is going anything but calm energy is a sign of fear and defensiveness. It could be fight, it could be flight, it could be freeze, or it could be fawning, which means trying to placate or please another, right? So there's different expressions of fear and defensiveness, but it's always going to go be coupled with some degree of energy that we would quantify as not calm, right? Not calm. The other thing is the mental focus, which the horse's ears tells us where the mind is focused. So
Mhm.
if the ears are pricking away from me, then I don't have the mental focus on me, which is what I need in order to change the physical balance. I need a horse that keeps the mental focus towards me, or at least internal in themselves,
Mhm.
and calm energy. That brings up their conscious awareness so that they start to discover the comfort through the changes in the mechanical coordination. So if I don't have, and the way this works, we can't make a horse feel safe, but we can redirect the mental focus.
Mhm.
So there's two ways to get there. Those left circles are hard for both of you. It requires mental focus just to do it, even though it's heavy and it's hard,
Mhm.
right? So whenever he gets distracted, you could use that as an opportunity to work on a left turn, right? Or a left circle and go, let me give you something harder to think about and forget about that thing that's distracting you, right? Or if the ears prick off to the right and the head goes up and he shows a little anxious reaction, then we can use the left rein. Even if we lose the balance, we go, let's redirect your mind away from whatever's bothering you and towards the feeling of safety. And
Okay.
that's something I do with young horses on the first couple of rides all the time. They are not allowed to prick their ears away from me because it's a safety issue. They could have a very quick, big reaction. And so before he takes off and gets almost hard to stop, his mind is going to go there first and the energy. So if I get a not calm energy, if it's aimed at me with tension, I have the defensiveness of fight. If the attention is aimed away from me and I have the energy of anxiety, I just have the fear expression of flight. It's just
Mhm.
two different expressions to fear. And every horse is capable of every single one, right? So if he's coming at me, if you think in terms, counterbalance is going to bring the feeling of safety. So a horse that's in a fight defensive mode, right? We could call them aggressive or snarky or pushy or whatever. The counterbalance, because that defensive strategy always involves looking at the fear trigger, going towards the fear trigger. So the counterbalance is get the mind off of you and get the body to move away from you. And that's the counterbalance to that defensive strategy. Then he might instantly go, oh, if you want me to go away, I'm going to just shift into flight mode. And the flight defensive strategy means like a scattered attention or not being able to look at you or focus on you. And the movement is he's trying to get away from you. So
Mhm.
the counterbalance to flight is to get their mind focused on you and ask them to come towards you.
Yeah.
And they can shift between fight and flight very quickly. So we have to adapt. When do we want them to come towards us? When do we want them to push away from us? And
Mhm.
that gets you out of sort of the realm of treats because that's not the only positive reinforcement. And ultimately, when he's expressing fight or flight energy, fight or flight behavior, losing his mental focus on you or his calm energy, more than a treat or any kind of reinforcement, he wants to feel safe,
Mhm.
right? And so the feeling safe becomes its own reward.
That is
And
fascinating. Okay, very
and
good.
you can make him feel safe by giving him a mental puzzle because you're not dealing like with Rarely Wrong, her energy is still so extreme. Even though it's still fight flight behavior, we have kind of a mild, moderate, and severe level, right? Rarely Wrong's been up in the severe level for a while, and I'm happy just to go from severe to moderate, knowing we're not done. You
Mhm.
and Deacon live in the mild, maybe moderate on some days.
Oh yeah, definitely mild.
Yeah. So when it's mild, we can kind of ignore it until it becomes a big problem. But I would just pay attention to it and go, if he's having a distracted day and a tiny bit of anxiety, direct his mind back towards you, right? And do something that helps him reduce anxiety and find calmness. That could be you enter the physical door, you give him a physical challenge that's so hard, he has to think about it,
Okay.
right? Not in a bad way. You could also do something so simple, like on a halter and lead rope, say, shake the lead rope and go, don't look over there. It's scaring you. Look over here. Just look
Yeah,
at
I've been
me.
doing that
Don't
a
look
lot.
over there.
That has helped get his attention on me.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's an example. Everything you said is perfect, and that I can see how that would make a lot of sense. Um, two little details for questions.
Hmm.
When I'm just leading him somewhere, like, and I want him to halt, and he doesn't halt, whereas sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't because he just becomes unaware of me, like he ignores me, like I'm not
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've started giving him treats when he halted because I want him to think about me and not about something else. So when he ignores me on the ground like that, do I make a real obvious, is this like an obedience issue where I correct it? Or,
It's if we look at it dynamically, it's that you're less important than the thing that has his attention.
yeah, but there's no thing that has his attention. It's like he's not looking at anything. He just has zoned out and like is ignoring me.
Yeah. So then you need to let him know where you are. And because we're smaller than horses, we use tools like lead ropes or riding whips or long whips to sort of define like an invisible bubble around us. So, like for example, if I'm leading a horse and I know that horse is just not paying attention and may easily trample me or step on me, it's my responsibility to let that horse know, hey, I'm this big, right? I'm not expecting him to pay attention to me. I'm going to cause him to pay attention to me by maybe swinging that lead rope around me, not at him, right?
Okay.
Maybe I do jumping jacks. Maybe I wave my arms, but I take up at least an arm's length worth of space so that I have a second before he steps on me or bumps into me or doesn't halt, right?
Okay.
So if I'm swinging a lead rope or a whip, I'm using it sort of just to define the edge of my invisible space. That movement is going to cause him to look at you and notice you're there, just like the cats chase my riding whip, right? So that movement is like controlled spooking, so to speak. There's movement that's going to catch their attention. Do something unexpected, you will always get his attention, right? Doing something
Okay.
unexpected. And then be prepared with your tools to say, you need to be mindful of me as a 6 foot wide person, 6 feet tall, 6 feet wide. I'm not only this, right? And so they learn very easily, just like they learn the lead mare in the pasture has a 50-foot bubble of personal space. Don't go near the lead mare, right? You have to define your own personal space and how much you want to feel comfortable. And that's not up to him, it's up to you to let him know. Here's the edge. This is where I
Okay.
don't want you. Th-
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I used that technique. I just didn't know if that was the best thing to do for this situation. So that's good to know. And then the other thing is, I've been grooming him in his stall so he's free to walk around and we can work on his respect for my space, when
Hmm.
he's free in the stall. And that has gotten really good. He's good about that. But
Good.
like today though, I walked in, he had just finished his food, his grain, and he was eating hay. And I could tell that he just kind of wanted a moment alone, which is fine. But eventually I went in and was going to walk around and pet him and just start grooming him. And he gave me this little bit of a snarky attitude. And so I was afterwards, I thought, that probably should have been when I corrected that. So, because every time he behaves that way, I need to deal with it. I can't just let it slide. Is that true? Or do I just not?
It kind of depends. Like it depends on if they give us the stink eye, but they're not pushing towards our space, then
Mhm.
they're just letting us know what they think. No harm, no foul.
Okay.
What's dangerous to us, especially if you're working in a stall at Liberty, if we don't have a tool and we sort of shrink back when they
Mhm.
do that because we don't have a tool, because we could get hurt, they're going to take that little shrink back as an invitation to push us around more.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think he's not aggressive in that way. I can just tell that he was just like, I'm not ready to deal with you yet. I haven't had my morning coffee kind
Yeah,
of an attitude.
yeah. And I
It
go,
wasn't it
they're
wasn't
individuals.
scary. It wasn't
Yeah.
scary or threatening, but I just thought I'm trying to learn how to deal with this personality that I haven't had in a horse before. So I don't know how fastidious I need to be for those little details.
So imagine him in his own invisible bubble and you're always you in your invisible bubble.
Hmm.
And what horses are basically trying to figure out with other herd members. So if you
Hmm.
can catch your horse and put a halter on, you're in the herd,
Yeah.
right? Once we're in the herd, we're either a tolerated herd member that doesn't always have to be listened to, or we're a trusted herd member, maybe even on the board of directors as leadership, right?
Yeah, I'm
And
not there
so, yeah,
yet.
so the way they decide who the trusted herd member is and who the sort of tolerated herd member is between these two invisible bubbles. The game is sort of who controls the real estate, who's moving who,
Hmm.
right? And so if we have no tools, we need a big bubble, or we're going like we can make our bubble whatever size we want and we can define it with any tool we have available. But if a horse gives me a sour look, but they don't try to push their bubble towards my bubble, that's
Hmm.
just an opinion. That's not him really testing me. And I go, everybody's entitled to their opinion. That's fine, right? But if he gave you a kind of the stink eye and took a step towards you or shifted his energy to get you to move your bubble a little bit back,
Hmm.
that's him figuring out, okay, if I move her, then I'm the protector of her, which means I don't listen to her, she listens to me. That's the conversation going on,
Okay,
right?
so anytime I get the sense that he's trying to move me, that's when I set my boundary and say no.
Yeah, and essentially you don't have to ever aggress him, you don't have to correct him, it's no big deal. He's testing that you know how to protect yourself and that you can hold your ground.
So just holding my ground is enough of a statement. I don't have to.
That's all you have to do. Hold your ground. He doesn't get to push you out of the way. If he looks like he's making a serious threat, going, I'm really going to move you, then that's why we need tools to just, our body is just not as big, right?
Okay.
Body to body, we're going to lose against a horse. We're not that big. And so, but it's really where horses are testing has more to do with space and direction. It
Okay.
has to do with who's moving who, who's causing the other bubble to either move or not move. So if you look at a dominant horse in the pasture, it's not the wild one, it's the one who doesn't get out of the way, either at the gate, at the water trough, or when they want something. The other horses organize around the one that doesn't move,
Okay.
right?
Well, in this particular situation, he I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I went around to the far side of where I was, and he swung his head around towards me. Like he wasn't trying to bite me, but he was just, that was like, hey, lady.
Warning. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course I was surprised. So I think I did step back for a second, but then I looked at him and it's like, uh-uh. I just kind of said that was my attitude. I didn't do anything. But
Yeah, so maybe just have a halter and lead rope over your arm when you go into the stall. So if nothing else, think of your tool, and all horses, even the most aggressive horses, understand that every individual has the right to protect themselves. They will never become more aggressive when we sort of use what we have to hold our ground or protect ourselves if they attack, right?
mhm,
So that head sling was him pushing on you,
mhm,
sort of just testing, right? And if he does that and you move back, go, okay, I blew it that time. He won that battle, but it doesn't mean he wins the war. It's like we can still have a conversation. And it's not really about winning or losing. It's more about horses need to know that we're qualified to protect them. And
mhm.
so a horse will try to push us around or even act aggressively towards us because of insecurity. And he wants to know that you're qualified to keep him safe by proving to him you don't give up your ground and you will not be tolerated to be attacked. You won't tolerate being attacked.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
when you can do that with him, you're convincing him that you could do that with anybody who attacked your herd of two.
Okay.
And so that's what makes him feel safe. And then he can relax because he goes, oh, okay, you've got this. If I feel unsafe, I'm going to check in with you. But
Yeah, that's why I think this is so important that I learn how to do this correctly for all these little instances because he has this chronic tension mentally. So I think if he can trust me, it will alleviate some of that.
yeah, and it's kind of ironic. I actually just did a recent podcast on exactly dealing with aggressive horses. And he's not aggressive, but
Yeah, not at all.
I go, any behavior that's in the fight defensive category
Hmm.
potentially in the extreme becomes aggression.
Hmm.
So it means something, even if it's mild. And it's just the way that some horses prefer to express uncertainty, question marks, insecurity, maybe fear, maybe just sort of, I'm not sure about how our deal works. And
Hmm.
so if you think of your bubble not being pushed around by his bubble,
Hmm.
he will relax.
Okay, that's really good to know. I will work on
Mhm.
that.
And then if he really tests, I can move you in your bubble, you're going to have to show him, no, I'm going to move your bubble away instead of you causing me and my bubble to move away.
Okay.
Right. And it can all be done without any touching. That's why I'm using bubbles, because I go, all of this could be done 50 feet apart from each other.
Mhm.
It really has nothing to do with a physical reward or punishment system. It's sort of just they're reading our energy and we're playing with spatial awareness. That's
Mhm.
how they decide that you're trustworthy and you're capable to protect the herd or you're not. They still
Okay.
like us even if we're not, but they don't have to listen to us.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That's
so
great.
then the distraction and the low level anxiety that you get outside of the barn is just he's switching strategies, but his distraction is his way of telling you, since you're not qualified up there, I'm going to keep an eye out for danger.
Okay.
Right. And so to redirect his attention or give him something to do that focuses that attention, you're basically saying to him, no, I've got this. There
Mhm.
is no danger. I know you're going to be safe. So let's just focus here.
Yeah. Okay. My other two horses, I became their herd leader like immediately. And so this is
Yeah.
new for me that I'm having to work at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Some horses hand it over and other horses really make you work for it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the videos I'll put up with Rarely, like she's one that, man, do you have to work for it? Because the more complicated the horses are, the more physical issues they have, the harder it is for them to feel safe in their own skin, no matter what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult. And so with Deacon, part of it could be physical, part of it could be the relationship with him, part of it could just be nobody ever helped him through this before. He doesn't know any better.
Well, all of that's been so helpful because there's so much property at this barn that I would love to go explore.
Hmm.
But until he gets more stable physically and mentally, it's just not going to be productive. So I'm just going to stay in this ring until we reach some type of plateau. And I feel
Or
like,
at least until you have your first real breakthrough. I think as you gain more understanding and he starts to make some physical changes, as well as, he can pay attention to you for longer periods, he's calmer across the board, he's making
mhm,
these physical changes of coordination. When you start to feel like, okay, we're not done, but we've really got the hang of this,
mhm.
then you can go start a new challenge in another location. Something simple, but you could maybe start exploring the property more on the ground or, hand walking, something like that.
Yeah, because he'll go out there, but it's not productive. He's just tense the whole time. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
you
good.
need to have your first kind of breakthroughs in understandings and experience before you try challenging it too much. It'll be faster if you're in a place where he mostly feels safe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kirsten, thank you so much. This is just so helpful.
Oh, good. Good. Let
I
me
really
stop.
appreciate all of this.
Yeah, and again, like in the group and some of the Wexford Training Barn videos that I'm posting, you'll see different horses kind of at different stages, basically doing the same thing. Because
Yeah.
the reason we need the learning frame of mind is that is either dominance in the parasympathetic nervous system or it's a cohesion of the nervous system if we're doing hard work,
Mhm.
right? Which means the the horse is calm, the horse can focus and think mentally rather than having fear-based reactions.
Mhm.
And the physiological reality is you really can't change the coordination from any current habit or instinctual posture if the body doesn't first feel safe. And because it requires conscious awareness to change coordination.
Yeah.
That's true for the horse as much as us. And
Mhm.
so that's why it's a process of discovery. And I think that's what you're starting to kind of get used to is that it's not like a posture change. He changes and he stays because you did the right exercise.
Yeah,
It's
and
like a,
that's what all of my training has been, is you put their feet on the circle and then they will eventually become straight. And that's all that I've been taught. And so it's like, that
yeah.
didn't work. So,
No, because tasks are not dynamic. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What you discovered was you could make 1,000 perfect circles with a crooked horse. It doesn't change that at all. And
Hmm.
when we start to focus on the dynamic influence of your right rein resistance, the dynamic influence of your body weight sitting against his muscle tightness on that problem. When you
Hmm.
say, yes, we're going to turn, but you might have to slow down or you might have to speed up,
Hmm.
those are the kind of influences that are going to alter coordination.
Yeah, very
And,
good.
and and it's so dynamic. The hard part of teaching it is it's wildly unpredictable too. I have no idea,
I know
you
that's
know,
very frustrating to flip my brain to understand that
yeah.
and how to apply the theory and what to look for. It's just a whole different way of thinking about horses.
Well,
Like,
and think of every interaction you have with Deacon, boil it down to a yes, no conversation.
yeah, I saw a video you did about that. That helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And so increasing the feel of an aid, him resisting more, him getting anxious, him getting distracted, those are all kind of no's.
Hmm.
Him getting calmer, that's a yes. Him flicking an ear towards you or focusing, that's a yes.
Hmm.
Him reducing the amount of force you need in your aids. Those are yes, 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 yes.
Hmm.
Or even if he goes, feels easier, like the right turns you're describing are yes, 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 yes. When you're
Hmm.
describing the struggle of the left turn, he's like, no, and you say, yeah, you could with the right rein. And he
Hmm.
says no, and you say, yeah, you could with your left seat bone, right? And he says, okay, I think I can. I'll continue the walk. And the longer you stay on that circle, you're looking for things to feel more like your right circles, which
Hmm.
feels more like a yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And so we're always building on with horses what feels better. That's
Hmm.
how they get on board with us, is because we're changing their internal experience in the time that they're with us. And that goes way beyond tasks and obedience.
Yeah.
But it gets to the heart of how we overcome problems, how we develop a relationship, and how we help develop skills where the individual maybe doesn't understand or lacks talent. We can always fill in for talent with skills.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Well,
and
good.
I'm already seeing progress, so that's good. Hopefully,
Great.
it'll continue.
No, and everything you've written about in your emails and what I just saw on the video, you're absolutely doing all the right things. you're not yet sort of finding the feedback that you need to feel confident about it. But
Yeah.
that will come.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I can live with zero feedback as long as I know that my method is on the right track. I know the feedback's going to come. And I think until I got to this point where I understood the theory and I understood, all of his little changes and
Yeah.
wonkiness, that just throwing me off. And now I feel like I have a path that I understand enough to keep him on it. And so I know it'll take some time, but I feel like he's on the right path. So that's good.
Yeah. And he confirms that every time he tries to lengthen his neck, every time
Mhm.
he gets a little lighter on your correction, every time he offers to focus on you, every
Mhm.
time the anxiety level or the snark moves towards calmness, all of that is instant feedback from him that even if there's still struggle and a million mistakes, you're definitely on the right track.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And I've even had spontaneous, it's happened. I thought it was just my Arab at first, but a lot of horses at the end of the work session, even though it's been heavy and awkward and they've struggled, they'll know we're at the end. I'll get off the horse or I'll drop the long rein or whatever, and I get a nicker. I get like
Oh,
a spontaneous nicker. And I
that sounds.
go, they don't mind the struggle because it's interesting to learn.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
us struggling to learn something in school. That's part of what keeps you focused and interested. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily a bad thing
Mhm.
as you struggle through it or he struggles through it.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good. I'm getting more confidence as we go through this. So
Good,
thanks.
good.
I
All
hope you
right.
have the rest of your week.
Thank you. And let me